Thank you and welcome to the Lakewood City Council meeting of Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. Ms. Schumacher, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Brandstetter,
Here.
Councilmember Lauricella,
Here.
Councilmember Lindholm has been excused. Councilmember Pearson,
Here.
Councilmember Talbot,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Bell,
Here.
and Mayor Boke.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. And it's an auspicious occasion today. It's because we are proclaiming and recognizing the City of Lakewood's 30th anniversary. Over the past 30 years, the city has expanded its programs and partnerships, bringing together neighborhoods, families, businesses, institutions, organizations. Lakewood's growth is thanks to the dedication of our residents, volunteers, staff, and elected officials. This anniversary is a time to reflect on our shared history and look forward with fresh purpose. As we celebrate 30 years, we invite everyone to join our events throughout the year and encourage you to stay involved as we build Lakewood's future together. So I'd like to call on the following group to present, and I will read the proclamation, and we'll hand out city coins, and then we'll allow time for a photo. So Lisa Boyd and Brian Thomas are the former Mayor Dr. Claudia Thomas's family. Are they here? There's Brian, thank you. Dave Buer, is Mr. Buer here? There's Dave, looking good. First Community Economic Development Director, Alice Bush, First City Clerk, Chair of the Executive Committee of the Cityhood Transition Team. Bob Warfield and the Cityhood Transition Team. Walter Neary supported Cityhood Transition via work at Lakewood Journal. Steve Dunkelberger, the Cityhood Transition Team. Chris Kaufman, there he is, Chair of the Public Works Committee on Cityhood Transition Team, and Doug Richardson, our former mayor. So if you could all come down and I'll read the proclamation. And so
I'll just sit here.
better. This might be a slightly better arrangements than what you had, at the Target store or something when you first started? Fun Factory. So, whereas on March 14th, 1995, the voters of Lakewood voted to incorporate the City of Lakewood, and the City Council passed Resolution number 9510, setting the official date of incorporation for the City of Lakewood as February 28th, 1996, and marking the planting of a civic seed founded on shared values, local pride, and a vision for self-government. And whereas over the past 30 years, the City of Lakewood has grown strong through the dedication of its residents, businesses, community businesses, elected officials, and city staff, growing from a small vision into a strong and enduring presence as the second largest city in Pierce County, with nearly 65,000 residents and 4,700 businesses. And whereas, like a thriving tree, the city has weathered challenges, adapted, and continues to grow through thoughtful community engagement, comprehensive public safety strategies, civic innovation, economic development, environmental protection, and preservation, and financial transparency. And whereas over the past 3 decades, its branches have reached outward, expanding programs, partnerships, and strengthening the civic canopy that connects neighborhoods, residents, families, businesses, institutions, and organizations throughout our city. And whereas the growth of the city of Lakewood reflects a commitment to preserving its roots while branching out toward new opportunities that enhance quality of life, economic vitality, and environmental stewardship. And whereas the 30th anniversary of incorporation provides an opportunity to honor the city's past, celebrate its present, and look ahead with confidence and a renewed purpose as it continues to grow and flourish for future generations. Now, therefore, on the occasion of the City of Lakewood's 30th anniversary, the Lakewood City Council do hereby proclaim the year of 2026 as a year of celebration and urges all residents to join in recognizing this milestone and supporting its continued growth for years to come. Proclaim this day, 17th day of February, 2026. So thank you very much. Who would like to speak? Well,
See if we can get that.
we have a new coin.
You've been sitting in my chair for a while now.
Not as fast as you.
Move quick as- Sorry about that. I'm Doug Richardson, resident of Lakewood. Recently returned from Leavenworth, Washington, but I apparently left most of my functional back there. I'm sorry for that tonight. There's a bunch of people standing up here that, I happen to be elected to the first city council, but there's a lot of people that did a lot of work to document how it could be possible for a city to be established and actually thrive. And many of them are here today, many of them are not, who actually laid the groundwork for that first city council to be able to follow what their plans were in the pre-incorporation meetings. And we were able to get about the business of establishing a city in those ways. And I think of our late finance guy, miss him a lot. I also should tell you that Alice wasn't the first city clerk. She was also employee number 1. So in case you didn't know that, I think if I've got my numbers correct, we've only had 4 city managers in the time that we've been a city. And that's a testament to the people that the council has hired and their performance after that for the citizens of Lakewood. And there's some principal staff that are serving here that were serving when I was here, and they continue to do an absolute bang-up job. When we incorporated the election was in 95. The actual incorporation date was 96. The reasons for incorporation were pretty simple. The citizens of Lakewood felt like they weren't being represented in government by being part of a very large Pierce County. They also didn't feel as if they had local control over the use of land inside the city of Lakewood. They also didn't like the number of sheriff's deputies that were actually assigned to police the boundaries of Lakewood, Washington. And those are the primary drivers of why we became a city. And it included wanting to make sure we looked out for residents. So if they had to go to district court, they didn't have to drive downtown Tacoma. They could actually go to their own city hall. And as a city, we established the municipal court of Lakewood on the first day of cityhood, which had never been done. And I won't bore you with the one of many lawsuits that were filed that said maybe we shouldn't have done that. But I would point out, like many others, we were successful in that suit. So I wouldn't say 1996 was a banner year of cooperation at all levels of local government, but it eventually got there, and I think it exists in a very good way today. But I think I speak for the folks behind me as well. You faced challenges we did not. Okay? When we became a city, we didn't have another body down in Olympia that thought they knew best how to do land use in the cities and towns in Washington State. The reason you wanted to be a city, particularly a suburban city in those days, was to protect the character of your city and to allow for that local control so residents could live in the city in the manner in which they wanted to. And so I empathize with you for that. But in bragging on these folks that are back here, I would just tell you, all the time I mention to people, I go, okay, I challenge you to drive through the city of Lakewood any time of day and not spot at least one police car. I don't care what part of the city you go to. And it's very true. When I look back to 1995, you might go several days before you saw one. Because the total number of people that we contracted with when we first incorporated was 54 for 24/7 coverage in the city of Lakewood. And what are you, 100 and what sworn now? 102 sworn. So it's a much different place. But just as important as that is, this building didn't exist. The town center didn't exist in its current form. There are a lot of things that have changed. And it seems like a blink of an eye. It was 30 years ago. And I would actually ask anyone else who wanted to add a word, but you know, Dave Buer is synonymous with land use in Lakewood since we became a city. I mean, never thought you'd hear that some people complain that you're gone, Dave. But anyone else wish to say anything? I thank you for the invitation and continue the good work as you move the city forward for the next 30 years. Okay. You want to swear anybody in? Okay. You coming down, huh?
Steve, how are you doing?
Good. I'll say, there's my Lions dancer.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice to see you too. How are
You having
you?
fun?
Oh, I'm trying. I'm working
Good.
on it. I'm trying to learn all the time. Yes.
Who
Make
are we
sure
gonna
you-
have take this?
You want it?
Who's here from the Historical Society?
I can drop now.
Yeah, let's give Jeff the Historical Society.
Paul, could you hold that up one more time? That's relaxing. Thank you. I'm sure, yeah, 30 an hour.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight, and we look forward to different community celebrations during the year. So next is public comment. Public comments are accepted by mail, email, or by live, virtual, or in-person comment. Send comments in advance by mail or email to Brianna Schumacher, City Clerk, at 6000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington, 98499, or bschumacher@cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to 1 hour before the meeting have been provided to the City Council electronically, and the clerk will read the names of those who have submitted comments in advance.
Mayor, the city council received no written comments in advance of this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Please note that there is a public hearing this evening. Testimony related to the engineering development regulations must be done under the public hearing portion of the agenda, so it becomes part of the record. Please announce that members of the audience may comment on items relating to any matter related to city business under the public comments period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Virtual comments. If you'd like to provide live virtual public comments, you will need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by calling by telephone, dial 1-253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Or visit zoom.us and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name. Use the raise hand feature to be called upon. For those participating by calling in by telephone, to use the raise hand feature, press *9 on your phone. When you're unmuted, please provide your name and city of residence. Outside of public comments, all attendees on Zoom will continue to have the ability to virtually raise your hand for the duration of the meeting. You will not be acknowledged, and your microphone will remain muted except for when you are called upon. I'd like to call on the folks who are on the Zoom or phone call. So if you raise your hand, virtual hand to speak, Ms. Schumacher. It looks like we got a couple folks.
First, we have James Dunlop.
Thank you. Mr. Dunlop.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, my name is James Dunlop and I am a resident of Lakewood. So you are celebrating 30 years of Lakewood, Lakewood's incorporation as a city. And, you know, I do talk to people, I walk around and I get people's opinions. And from what I gather, the last 30 years have not been great. A lot of people have been saying how it's been a great disappointment. I believe a lot of the people who put a lot of effort into Lakewood becoming a city just don't think that things have worked out. And, you know, one problem of becoming a city is you take on a city bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy takes on a life of its own. And I think that, again, just talking to people, I do get the impression that over the last 30 years, Lakewood has been in decline. Now, I'm not saying that it was incorporation that directly led to that decline. I think you could argue that it was the building of the I-5 that had quite a devastating impact on the community. But, you know, I remember I was talking to someone who went to Clover Park High School in the 1940s, and apparently in the 1940s, you know, it was a really good school. I think she lived in Spanaway or somewhere like Spanaway or Parkland, and so she commuted like 10 miles to go to Clover Park High School in the 1940s. And you look at sort of education in Lakewood now, and it's the case that, you know, in 2013, Lakewood schools were about on the Washington average, and now, over 10 years later, 12 years later, 13 years later, they are completely below the Washington State average. I mean, that's just the schools. At least it's a sort of kind of like a thermometer, and of course that's not necessarily the city's the city's fault, but on the other hand, we're not talking about absolute scores. We're talking about relative. It's relative standing. So that is a measure of decline. And of course, the environment has been absolutely trashed over the last 30 years. I think, particularly, since, I don't know, 2000, the last 10 years and perhaps less, you've seen the complete and utter destruction of Woodbrook, and absolute contempt for the environment. It seems that Lakewood in a sort of a new way has almost been sort of prostituted out, so that sort of developers and others can benefit from it at the complete expense of its natural environment. And so I think to celebrate 30 years of Lakewood, I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think it should be a reflection and to ask yourself, ask what has gone wrong. So no, it is absolutely not a time for celebration.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. The next is 253-584-3548. You've got 3 minutes.
Hello, my name's Ken Paulson. I live in Tacoma, and I've got grandkids that live in Lakewood. And they live on Lockburn Street, just down from Burrs. And I have a complaint about the street. It's the reason why I'm calling. It's really about 100 feet from Silicon Boulevard, and then for about 75 feet, it's very dangerous. Sidewalks are a foot on one side and a foot and a half on the other side, higher than the street. There's parking on the west side, and there's one lane on the east side. And the speed limit's 25. I've been in my car there, and cars rip right by me. And apparently, nobody can change the speed limit because there's no law that says they can, unless you make one. But maybe a speed bump that would cause everybody to slow down to 15 miles an hour if you did a old style speed bump. Anyway, there are more kids than my grandkids that live in that area. And it's just it's really a skinny 26, 7, 8 foot wide road, parking on one side, can't park next to the curb because they have to be able to open their door. Very skinny road in Tacoma. That road would be 3 times wider on, for example, Park Street, and be 20 miles an hour. And there would be grass before you'd come to the sidewalks on each side of the road. Lots of space. And this particular road in Lakewood is very tight. Sidewalks right up to the edge. Waiting for a disaster to happen. And something really needs to happen. And that's what I am telling you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And we have one more, and we don't have a name, but it's Galaxy S9 Plus.
Galaxy S9 Plus, you have been unmuted. If you'd like to provide comments.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
on.
we gonna, okay,
Please state your name.
You have 3 minutes.
okay, my name is Sharon Ness, and I am a citizen here in Lakewood. I don't know, there's a huge echo. Anyway, can you hear me without the echo?
Yes.
Okay, so I have lived in the city of Lakewood for about 8 years now. I did own a home in University Place, but as a senior citizen, when I went on Social Security and pension, I had to sell it because things were too expensive. But what I'm coming to talk to you about is the Lakewood rental inspections. As I said, I've been in the same home for 7 years, and I have a great landlord. I've been through 2 inspections. The first one was, you've got fire alarms, fire detectors, carbon monoxide, the water heater is fine. That. This last inspection, the inspector felt that the 2 bedrooms needed heaters in them. Now I've got a fireplace, a gas fireplace in the living room that heats the house. And there's another heater, gas heater by the back bedroom, which heats that bedroom. The 2 bedrooms that the inspector felt needed heaters don't. I mean, we've been here 7 years, never had a complaint. So I've never complained about it. What I want to know, my landlord is very frustrated, and he's looking at selling because he's just tired of the regulations and the increases that keep coming. I noticed on Neighborhood Today that a landlord was complaining about a new fire fee. Apparently it's not a quote tax, but a new fee added to landlords of rentals. So what do you have? I guess my thought is there a committee or a task force of like landlords and tenants that could help with the inspection process? I know you're not going to get rid of it. It's every 5 years, but it seems like it needs to be fairer for the landlords. If we got a good landlord, you want to keep them. And, some of us on senior citizens on fixed incomes and stuff, we're having a hard time finding places to live. My son and his daughter had to move in with me because of expenses. And it's just, maybe I'm out of time, but anyway, I would like you to consider a task force or something, landlords and tenants.
Thank you for the comments, Ms. Ness. We urge you to send an email to the city manager so he can take a look at your information. Thank you. So that's it for everybody outside or phoning in or Zooming in. So next we'll do inside, and I've got a list here. We'll start off with Mr. John Burns.
Hello, I'm John Burns. Oh, is this working? Okay. Resident of Lakewood, Washington. And I've had a chance to take a look at the volunteer program ordinance that's about to be put into place, and take a look at the volunteer handbook that's associated. And I think it's a good idea to have volunteers. If there's that kind of mojo in the community to get something done, then you might as well take advantage of it. However, I just want to mention that the responsibility to maintain those street ends falls upon the city by the state of Washington and the way things are set up. And realistically, we haven't had much city involvement with maintaining those street ends in particular. And that's the volunteer program related to street ends is what I'm most concerned about. We have 13 street ends here in Lakewood, and some of them are pretty heavily encroached. Some of them are lightly used. Some of them are too steep to do much with. And so many of them historically have been maintained by residents, and they do that volunteer work. I personally volunteer to clean up the 100th Street end, and I get rid of invasive plants and trim ivy from trees and keep the berries from overgrowing the trail. So I can appreciate being a volunteer myself. I do it without pay. I do it on my own, and I do it under the auspices of permission that's been granted from a past head of Parks and Recreation. So, so if we can get volunteers, it's a big we to do some of that work, that's great. But there are 13 sites, and I sincerely doubt that we can get 13 groups of volunteers for one at each site. And it's a lot of work for one group to manage all sites. It's probably would be more prudent to have a contractor that would be trained up, one contractor whose job was to do maintenance and haul things in and out and knew how to do it, that was bonded and insured. And that's what I would recommend just for scale purposes, is manage the contractor. It's not a lot of money. The city's got enough money to do something like that. You know, Joe's landscaping and pruning could do a better job than many volunteers, and I think you'd have some control over quality, and it wouldn't be nearly as much work and less expensive in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Next up, Hallie McCurdy.
Good evening, Mayor Boki, and Deputy Mayor Bell, and the rest of council. I'm actually not here on behalf of the fire department today. My name is Hallie McCurdy, but I'm here on behalf of the Clover Park Rotary. I had the chance to talk to Mayor Boki at the Lions Crab Feed over the weekend and told him about our Clover Park Rotary Invitational. We have a great fundraising event coming up, and I have some flyers here that talk about the event, and I wanted to invite the rest of council and anybody in the audience to come to our Clover Park Rotary Invitational. So I'll just pass those along. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you guys can make it.
Thank you, Ms. McCurdy. Christina Minetti.
Hello, everybody. I have a comment on behalf of the Gary Oak Coalition, Lakewood. My name is Christina Minetti. During your last meeting, you heard about and commented on an oak measuring roughly 60 inches in diameter. Actually, it's supposed to be 60 inches in diameter at breast height, and which by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's rule of thumb of 15 to 20 years per inch of diameter is potentially 900 or even more years of age. Now, you have to make sure that you guarantee it the conditions it needs so that it can continue to live and hopefully even thrive. So consider this. This oak has survived nearly a millennium of storms, fires, and human change, only now to face destruction through modern indifference and bureaucracy. If this council allows conditions that lead to its decline, history will not remember that you technically followed municipal code. It will remember that you failed to protect something irreplaceable when you had full knowledge and full authority to act. And we will make sure that everybody remembers. Simply prohibiting its removal is not protection. Surrounding an ancient oak or any tree with pavement, traffic, and heat is a slow execution carried out under the appearance of compliance. I'll wait until you're done talking. Your own code banning paving within the drip line is a bare minimum, written for ordinary circumstances, not for a tree that predates the founding of this country. Anyone who understands basic ecology knows that concrete, soil compaction, and heat island effects will stress and ultimately kill this oak. Decades in the future, we will probably be dead by the time it dies. That process has already begun with the adjacent semi-truck parking lot. Expanding development around it would guarantee its decline. And when that happens, no ordinance language will excuse the outcome. The responsibility will rest here with this council and with decisions made in this room. At the last meeting, Mayor Boki acknowledged that environmental considerations were ignored when planning for the destruction of the Woodbrook neighborhood. That admission carries a moral obligation. Recognition without corrective action is not accountability, it's just words. You now have a chance to do better. Acquire this property and the neighboring wetland, as the city has done elsewhere. Use Conservation Futures funding, as Mayor Boki mentioned. Preserve this site as open space for a life-giving oak and critical wetland. Show that Lakewood values stewardship over convenience. A possibly 900-year-old living being stands at the mercy of your decision. Future residents will either thank you for protecting this legacy or be forced to look back in anger at how officials could knowingly allow such a terrible loss. The question is simple. Will Lakewood be remembered for preservation or, again, for preventable destruction? Thank you. Christina Minetti, Lakewood. I've lived here for 54 years, so long before the city was incorporated. Tonight, you are celebrating Lakewood's 30th anniversary. But before you talk about achievements, you owe the city something far more difficult than that kind of empty celebration. You owe it honesty and remorse. Because the story of Lakewood's first 30 years is not one of stewardship. It's a story of destruction carried out project by project, decision by decision, often by the very people sitting at this dais tonight. You usually point proudly to sidewalks, roundabouts, and roadway and park improvements, yet those projects have repeatedly meant cutting down irreplaceable living history. Mature Gary oaks that stood here for centuries before the city existed, and other trees. You know, I've done this so many times, and it's really hard for me to continue. Hipkins Road, Phillips Road, the Fort Slocum Park, the trail from Tillicum, where along with other Gary oaks, one roughly 590-year-old oak was cut down, a tree older than the United States itself. And you call this progress, but it's not. It's city-sponsored vandalism and desecration. Yes, desecration. And then there's Washington Boulevard, just to take one public works example, a monument not to good planning, but to bureaucracy. There weren't oaks involved there as far as I know. The single lane is choked by a median, trapping drivers behind garbage trucks, and rocks are like baking these young trees that they put there. Who designs plantings with trees to fail like that? Why does Lakewood refuse to consult people who actually understand trees, ecology, or livable streets? Over these 30 years, you have destroyed and erased places that people loved. The Tanzer Library, a neighbor's home on Lake Steilacoom, demolished for a 4-stall boat trailer parking lot, the flea market, the historic drive-in theater, entire neighborhoods for warehouses in Sylvan Park, Springbrook, and Woodbrook, where hundreds of oaks were cut down. Yes, hundreds of protected oaks were cut down. Even one of your own statements last time acknowledged that no one was thinking about the environment. That is the truth of these 30 years. So no, this is not a legacy that deserves applause. It's a record that should weigh heavily on your conscience. If tonight means anything, let it not be self-congratulation, not mouthing reassuring platitudes. Let it be shame and humility, an admission that mistakes were made repeatedly, and a promise backed by action to stop sacrificing heritage neighborhoods and ancient trees for pointless, badly designed projects and warehouses. Because leadership isn't measured by proclamations, especially Orwellian doublespeak and analogies likening the city to a tree. I couldn't believe that. It's measured by whether you have the courage to face what evil that you have done and finally choose to do better.
Thank you, Ms. Minetti. Okay, that's everybody who's signed up. Now I have another name here, but this is for the public hearing later, Mr. Keith Towell. So you're going to speak in the public hearing later? Oh, okay, okay. I'll call your name again anyway, because I have to. Mr. Marjolili, you got 3 minutes.
Good evening to all of you. My name is Ibrahim Mir Jalili. I'm a resident of the city of Lakewood. Well, 30 years has passed since this city has been established. When I look at it, and with my family, we look at it as a loss, as a disgrace, unfortunately. It has costed at least my family and the city resident probably around about $5 million. Why? Our home valued about $2 million. Well, we also paid for attorney fees, so the city has, and this case is continuing. For what? For a parking lot. Well, and how that parking lot came about? A man hired to do a survey for the city, recorded a map on March 24th, 2020. This is his map. He recorded it. If one looks at this map versus his next map that was never signed, never recorded, and yet presented to the court as our parcel, as the block 32 of the Clinton addition, with what? By calculation versus the parcel. Let me read some of those to you, please. So you see that either this map is correct or this one is correct. We believe neither one of them are, but this one, I'm sorry to say that. I know that the judge never probably looked at it, but this city, I don't know how many engineers it has, but if it's paying about $2 to $3 million per month in salary, they should be able to figure this out with a few attorneys. When you look at these block 32 and the shared boundary of lot 8 and 9, 9 being ours and 8 our neighbor, it states his own recording. He states that the eastern western boundary length should be 108. You think, what did he record, calculate, supposedly, to come up with the midline? 128.73, 21 linear feet. That's how he draw the midline in that block. And nobody saw that? No engineer could see it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marjolili. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in public comment this evening? Anyone else about any matter related to city business? Thank you very much. I'll declare public comment closed. Ms. Schumacher, the consent agenda.
Consent agenda A, approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of February 2nd, 2026. B, motion number 2026-12, authorizing the execution of an agreement with Sound Electronics for modernization of the fire alarm monitoring panel and smoke detection system at City Hall. C, motion number 2026-13, authorizing the execution of an amendment to the interlocal agreement with Pierce Transit for law enforcement services. D, motion number 2026-14, authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Washington State Department of Transportation to return right-of-way to the city of Lakewood. E, motion number 2026-15, authorizing the execution of an interagency agreement with the Washington State Department of Commerce for the Natural Environment and Climate Change Program. F, motion number 2026-16, authorizing the award of a construction contract to R.L. Elia Company in the amount of $630,935 for the 112th Street Far West Drive to Holden Road project. G, items filed in the office of the city clerk. 1, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of November 3rd, 2025. 2, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of November 7th, 2025. And 3, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of December 1st, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. Is there anyone who would like to pull any item off the consent agenda this evening? Okay. Could I get a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. We'll do this by a voice vote. All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The consent agenda is approved. Thank you. So next is public hearings and appeals. This is the date set for public hearing on the engineering development regulations, including the Engineering Standards Manual, Lakewood Municipal Code, LMC, Titles 12 and 13, and Chapter 18A.20. I would like to call on the Planning and Public Works Assistant Director, Ms. Angie Silva, to update on this. The council received a briefing on this and had a discussion on at the study session. So Ms. Silva, would you like to take us through?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and the public. As the mayor mentioned, this is a follow-up from last week's study session on the draft proposal as it relates to engineering development regulations comprised in our engineering standards manual, Lakewood Municipal Codes, Titles 12, 13, as well as Chapter 18A20. Since 2025, the city has undertaken a comprehensive update to its infrastructure-related municipal code. As part of this effort is intended to update outdated regulatory framework in order to align with current federal and state law, regional utility standards, and the city's comprehensive plan. The amendments also focus on modernization, reorganization, and consolidation of technical standards and process streamlining. Prior to coming to the City Council, the Planning Commission also reviewed the draft proposal through multiple study sessions and held a public hearing and forwarded their recommendation to this body on January 21st. Tonight, as mentioned before, is scheduled for a public hearing. I do not have a formal presentation on the 300 and something odd pages subject to the hearing tonight, but I'm happy to answer any questions before receiving testimony, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Silva, and we did go through this at some length. So just thank you for your synopsis of this. This is a rather extensive change, most of it in a regulatory nature. So we will move on to public testimony. Public testimony is accepted by email, by mail, email, or by live, virtual, or in-person comment. You can send testimony in advance by mail or email to Brianna Schumacher, the city clerk at 6000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington, 98499, or B. Schumacher at cityoflakewood.us. Testimony received up to 1 hour before the meeting has been provided to the City Council electronically. The clerk will read the names of those who have submitted testimony in advance. Ms. Schumacher, did we get anything?
Mayor, the City Council received no testimony in advance of this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. Virtual testimony. If you'd like to provide live virtual testimony, you will need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by calling telephone 1-253-215-8782 and enter a meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Or visit zoom.us and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name. Use the raise hand feature to be called upon. For those participating by calling in by telephone, use the raise hand feature, press *9 on your phone. When you're unmuted, please provide your name and city of residence. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Outside of public testimony, all attendees on Zoom will continue to have the ability to virtually raise your hand for the duration of the meeting. You will not be acknowledged, and your microphone will remain muted for when you are called upon. So I'd like to first call upon the Zoom. Do we have anybody by Zoom or telephone who would like to speak to, and this is the public comment on the new development, the new regulations?
Mayor, we have no virtual attendees at this time.
Doesn't look like it. Okay. So now we'll come inside the building here and I will call on you again, Mr. Towell, if you'd like to speak, but you said no, you didn't want to speak on this. Do we have anybody here who would like to speak to the changes in the Lakewood Municipal Code Titles 12, 13, and Chapter 18A.20? Anyone who would like to speak to this? Okay. Doesn't appear to be anyone else who'd like to speak or anyone who'd like to speak, so I'm going to declare that the public comment, public hearings in this matter be closed. So we'll go on to our ordinances, ordinance number 844, Ms. Schumacher.
Ordinance number 844, adopting amendments to the Lakewood Municipal Code related to the allowed locations for alcohol production and sales.
Okay, and Ms. Spear, would you like to speak to this before we move the legislation for council discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a very brief summary. This is on page 388 of your packet. There was a study session held January 20th, a public hearing held on February 2nd, and then tonight is the night that the council is scheduled at this point to take action. Just to note, in the agenda bill packet, you have the draft ordinance as attachment B, but you also have as attachment A, if you'll recall the conversation that was had during the study session of the potential to add brewery as an allowed use in the MF3 zones throughout the city. If you were to want to do that, or if someone wanted to bring this as a motion for consideration, attachment A has that language. Otherwise, attachment B is the ordinance without that change. So the council could take action first on attachment A as an amendment, or just could go straight to the draft ordinance in attachment B. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. Are there any questions for Ms. Spear? Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm calling it up here. The definition of tasting room, I think, let me see. Yeah, tasting room. So it said that a tasting room can be in a brewery or a winery, at least. And then when you look at the table, it only has brewery as the permitted in MF3 with the asterisks, but it doesn't have tasting room or distillery. Is that because they're like nested underneath?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That clarifies that for me. Thank you.
Any more questions for Ms. Spear? Okay, so before we start council discussion on the matter, would someone like to move it? Ordinance number 844.
So moved, Mayor. I'd like to move forward ordinance number 844.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 844. Is there any more council comment? Councilmember Laura Sella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few weeks ago, when this first came up, I think I was the one who originated the concern about being allowed in MF3 asterisks versus MF3 and how that could lead to some confusion. So I asked for some clarification on that, and that led to us looking at putting it in all of MF3, which I don't think is necessarily the route that we want to take. So as this is, I would be good with option B, but I would add distillery and tasting room to the permitted uses in MF3 asterisks. That makes sense.
Would you like to make an amendment?
In just a second, I'm just gonna look at the description here.
And direct us to the page or the table that you'd like to change, and then I'd like, because
Right,
and
so
I think I need Ms. Spear to help us with that.
I just asked her.
you asked whether distilleries were included as part of the breweries, and she said yes. I don't think that necessarily makes sense.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I thought the question was whether tasting rooms was within the brewery and the distillery, and the tasting room is, yes.
Right.
It
and
could
the
be
right-
a use underneath that.
in
But
the-
breweries and distilleries are two different things.
Okay.
In the write-up on page 388, when you talk about attachment A, that was going to be an amendment to allow breweries, distilleries, and tasting rooms in all MF3 zones. And I'm not suggesting we do that, but I would suggest we include distilleries and tasting rooms in the MF3 asterisks, which you would see on page, let me scroll down, 392.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I think I'm understanding your request, the table that's on page 392 is in the draft ordinance itself. If you were, I'm sorry, the ordinance, and then the following exhibit actually breaks out the various tables within our code, because there's commercial uses, there's residential uses, eating and drinking. This is a summary table that is attempting to show in one table things that actually have to change technically in our code in a couple of different places. But what Councilmember Laura Sella, I believe, is asking as a potential amendment here is to have that P there for MF3-1 for brewery, but also to have distillery and tasting room explicitly allowed in MF3-1 as well. Is that what you were suggesting?
That's correct. It would match the other allowed zones for distillery and tasting room.
So I've been looking at the page 392 that has the marked up 392 in our packet.
Yes.
That has the red line strikeout on. So where would we put the two? Distillery would then get.
There would be a P under MF3-1 asterisk, which
Okay.
is the MF3 that is exclusively within the Station District subarea, and adding a permitted indication for both distilleries and tasting rooms is what Councilmember Laura Sella was just suggesting.
I'm suggesting if we allow one, we should allow all those similar uses.
So I need you to make that into amendment.
So I may need some help from our attorney, but I can attempt. Move to amend ordinance this 345 or 344? 840. Or 844. Man, I'm all over the place. Yes, I would move to amend the ordinance currently before the council to include in the zoning classifications table for MF3-1 permissible use for distilleries and tasting rooms.
And so that would require a second.
Second.
Okay, so it has been, the amendment to the ordinance has been moved and seconded. So is there any further discussion? You've spoken to it
Yeah,
already.
my intent is if we're allowing breweries in the other zones and distilleries and tasting rooms, that we should also include them under the same justification as those other zones.
And I want to make sure we understand what MF3-1 is. So Ms. Spear, it's different than other MF3s.
Yes, multifamily 3 is a zone that is applied throughout the city, and it has a certain type of uses that are allowed within it and a certain density of housing units. MF3-1 is exclusively within the Station District subarea as opposed to the rest of the city. And because it is in that subarea, it has its own regulatory code, Title 18B versus 18A. In 18B, there are some different rules regarding commercial on the bottom and residential on the top of structures, because that is one of the areas where the city's trying to concentrate growth and density. And so this would allow, for instance, one of these establishments, a brewery, a distillery, a tasting room, to come into one of those buildings on the first floor and then have residential still on top. Whereas in the rest of the city, it would be a very different process to get there, coupled with the type of land uses that surround these other MF3 areas in the city.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. Any further discussion on this? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm opposed to the amendment. I agree with Councilmember Laura Sella that the attachment A of expanding and allowing these types of businesses in all of the MF3 areas of the city is inconsistent, because I think these uses are inconsistent with being something that is primarily and in most cases already developed residential areas to do that. And it goes on. This particular MF3 area, I think that we should take note of the reality of what is there. And in this particular area, while it is subject to 18B, 18B is similar to what we did in the downtown sub-area where we envisioned having lots of mixed use, where we had first floor things to go on. And to be honest, uh, it hasn't happened. And if we look in the Station District sub-area, the multifamily 3 development that's there is virtually 100% residential. And beyond that, it is, compared to other areas of the city, has a higher percentage of affordable residential, meaning it's residential areas that have a higher percentage of lower income residents. So that rather than saying that we have an ordinance in front of us that was going to allow breweries in that type of a neighborhood and expanding it to include distilleries and tasting rooms, I actually think we should be moving the other way and not allowing any of the 3 in this. And certainly if this amendment is not approved, I would be moving an amendment to delete the approval for breweries in the MF3-1 zone to do that, because I think it is not something that we want to impose in an area that we're specifically targeting to get lower income residents with a lower AMI than we are have on average throughout the city in multifamily 3 zones. So I'll be voting nay on the amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. Are there any more comments on the amendment? Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting in favor of the amendment. I think that I appreciate Mr. Branstetter's comments about where he would like to go with that. I don't think that this really changes anything. That area still has many other commercial uses, and the intent of doing mixed use is still there and allowed. This just provides some additional flexibility for folks if they could build something like that and entice those kinds of businesses. I think much like what you see in some areas of UP where there's tasting rooms and things with apartments and whatnot above, townhouses above, condos. I don't see any issues with that, so I'll be voting for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. Are there any more comments? Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate and I can understand Councilmember Loricella's proposal here. For me, when I look at this item, I go back to the discussion and the discussions that we had even on Planning Commission, because this came to Planning Commission several times. And when Planning Commission looked at it, that was one of the kind of things we looked at too, was there is and has been an interest from our members on Planning Commission about how can we encourage and realize that bottom floor commercial, top residential use of things. And even in our discussions and learning from one another, but also from staff, it became apparent through discussions that penciling out that type of development model is very hard. And then at the same time, public testimony that we heard during the public hearing and during discussions at Planning Commission, there were some thoughts expressed from the public about just concerns about mixing more adult uses in these residential areas. when I look at it, what I see in our zoning map and in our land use tables before us in this amendment, and also without, well, in this amendment, is that the land use, the zones that are permitted in the station, that are in the station district can include neighborhood commercial and regular commercial. And those zones in and of themselves are really best suited for any type of brewery, adult use, or at least better suited than MF31 or MF3. And so I think that with regard to both amendments, or excuse me, both attachments on the table, attachment A or attachment B, I think that both MF3-1 and MF3 are both contain the zones that allow for brewery and adult alcohol uses. So I don't think that including MF3, or excuse me, include allowing alcohol uses in MS3 further enhances it that more, all that more, because those uses are already allowed in the commercial zones and where they're probably better suited for that type of development and building code. So I guess what I'm getting at is I could support Councilmember Brandstutter in, and I could support the council in attachment A, the original proposal where the Planning Commission landed and before us today. The other thing too is that mixing MF, I guess we haven't seen adult uses or bars and breweries come into either the CBD where it's really allowed and where we really want to encourage it. And so it's easier, I think, to allow use, it's easier to permit uses than it is to try to take them away at a further period of time. And so it may be wiser and more prudent now to just allow, see what we get and allow these uses to come in under what's been proposed under attachment A and see what comes in. And then if we want to expand MF3 or MF31 to include those more additional breweries and distilleries, then it may be easier to do that in the future, but it's harder to take away and get rid of permitted uses once you've permitted them. So it may be wiser to just err on the side of being conservative here and see what we call in the future. And finally, to the point that Mr. Brandstutter made at exec session a few weeks ago, that MF3 really is intended for housing and multifamily housing, and we really are in need of housing everywhere. And so not to I would like to try to preserve what we have because we need that capacity. And so not to dilute the capacity for future additional housing by introducing more uses into that zone, especially when they are already permitted in the neighborhood commercial and CBD zones, which are just better suited for breweries, distilleries, and the building code requirements associated with them. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Are there any other comments on the amendment that has been proposed, which is to add as a permitted use distilleries and tasting rooms in the MF31 category, which is located exclusively within the Station District subarea? I'm reading that off page 392. So is there any other further discussion? Okay. So we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the proposed amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the vote is 4-2. The amendment passes. So we, as amended, we have now ordinance number 844 as amended in front of us. Are there any additional comments or amendments by members? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so I appreciate the vote that we just took that is going to expand it into doing that. And while I disagree with that particular expansion, I think that the body of the work that went into 844 to take a look throughout the city in all of the zones came out, appropriately in all the commercial and other zones that we have, to include the central business district of where these types of businesses might be productive and even enhance what is going on. So while I'm hoping that nobody tries to put a brewery or a distillery in a multifamily thing over there, because I value the rest of the ordinance, I'm going to vote in favor of 844.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstetter. Councilmember Laura Sella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one last comment that doesn't necessarily enter into this vote to approve this as amended. The origin of my concern a couple of weeks ago was confusion between MF3(1) asterisks and MF3, which I don't think this resolves that confusion. So I would appreciate if staff could look at what it would take. And I understand it may be, need to go back to the Planning Commission to retitle a zone, but maybe calling this some sort of mixed use or something like that, so it's not as confusable for me. If it's confusable for me, I'm guessing it may be confusable for others as I use words that I make up. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Laura Sella. Is there any other comments from any other members? Okay. So, Ms. Schumacher, could you call the roll?
Yo, sorry. Yes. Yes. Threw me out of order.
Sorry, as amended, attachment A, attachment as amended with
We just adopted the amendment.
With the amendments to be.
to expand the,
Yeah, so, yeah.
oh, nay.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Ms. Schumacher. Now we'll move on to ordinance number 845.
Ordinance number 845, establishing a community volunteer program for the adoption and stewardship of public streets, street ends, and public sites, repealing resolutions 1996-28 and 1997-13.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. On this, we'll call the Assistant Planning and Public Works Director, Ms. Silva, to give us a recap of this ordinance.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Mayor, this is another follow-up discussion from your February 9th study session. Included on your packet, starting on page 400, is a proposed ordinance that is intended to comprehensively update the city's volunteer program to modernize policies, strengthen legal and risk management protections, and formally incorporate stewardship of public street ends into the city's overall volunteer framework. The proposed ordinance establishes a citywide volunteer program and municipal code, intending to provide clear authority, governance, and consistency across departments. If approved. This sets forth several implementation needs, including formalizing the volunteer guidelines handbook and a number of different volunteer waivers, whether you're an individual or an organization that would be administrated through our neighborhood program coordinator and assigned to various departments based on applicability. With that, sir, I'm happy to answer any questions they may have.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. Are there any other questions for Ms. Silva? Do you have a question, Mr. Councilmember? Okay, Councilmember Ranstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Silva, within the ordinance, when we go to chapter 2.70, and 0.020, there are definitions, and there is a definition for volunteer group. That volunteer group why is that definition required as opposed to volunteer entity? And my question would be, is that this ordinance covers adopt a street program, adopt a site program, adopt a street end program. There currently exists some adopt a street contracts with individuals who aren't a group. Okay, and you don't have to be a incorporated something to be able to volunteer. And so that, and while it says that the definition of group includes an individual, that seems odd to be able to go and do that. And I was trying to decide do we need a definition for, I guess, where is the term volunteer group existing that it requires that there be a definition for a volunteer group? Or would you acknowledge that because some of these sites might be done by individuals, that entity would be a more appropriate wording?
I think the intent of the definition was to separate who would be signing an individual volunteer waiver form. That's a certain WCI format, certain topics need to be hit versus an organization. As it relates to the item D means an individual, comma, business. I think that probably had an additional comma that wasn't intended there. So welcome an amendment to clean that language up. And also add, I think there was a suggestion of the word use of entity as part of that overall broader group discussion of what a volunteer group means.
Yeah, I know that in one adopt a site, in one adopt a street thing, I'm a member of a group, an entity, but it's not just an individual thing. But I also know of a few individuals who have adopted streets. And so the word group seems strange to me, and that entity would cover them. Sorry, the definition includes the term individual is within the definition of group. I just trying to be clear to be able to go and do that.
I think from just kind of the drafter of this, I would support removing of the word individual, comma, and then also inserting entity as just that clarification seeking.
Okay, I was actually thinking more in terms of changing the title, the definition of including defining volunteer entity as what is being defined, and then leaving the definition the way the same. Is there some problem that I'm not seeing with doing that?
No, I think we have the same objective, whether we call it a group or an entity. I think we're within the realm of the intent of the language, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Talbo.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. I just had one question, and I asked it at the last study session, but could you remind me again whether minors are allowed or not allowed under this program? And if not, why not?
They are allowed, part of the WCIA, Washington Cities Insurance Authority guidance, they do provide parameters on the age of that. Within the guidelines that was part of the study session packet had it at the age of 15 or parental consent. So they have to get signing from their parents so that it's okay to volunteer at certain activities within the city. So the Promise Committee is a good example of that.
Okay, but like a scout troop that's under the age of 15 would not be allowed to?
No, I would probably categorize them as a group or entity as part of the
Got it.
previous.
Thank you. Yes, now, yes, jog my memory. Thank you very much.
There any more? Mr. Laricella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Silva, following up on something that came up in public comment, the establishment of volunteer groups to do this sort of work does not remove the responsibility from the city to maintain streets, public spaces, and parks.
That is
correct?
absolutely correct, sir. It does not remove that responsibility.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments from council members? So Ms. Silva, let's go back to the remarks that you made when Councilmember Branstetter was asking his questions. Page 404, page 3 of the ordinance, you're saying we need to remove a comma after individual?
I think Councilmember Branstetter, excuse me, sir, I think you were advocating for volunteer entity. Correct me on that as the definition.
Striking group and adding the word entity?
That's what I plan.
Okay, and then you're saying
And I believe Mr. Branstetter
said something about
still
a
wanted to
comma.
keep individual.
Okay, you want-
Correct me, sir.
The definition would stay the same.
Okay. Okay. So if we don't have any more further comments, Councilmember Branstetter, we would entertain your motion.
Mr. Mayor, to do things in the right order, I guess I move adoption of ordinance number 845.
Yeah, we haven't done that. Yeah. Good point. Second. It's been moved and seconded. Ordinance number 845 has been moved and seconded. Thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. And now we will entertain your amendment.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that within Exhibit A, Chapter 2.70, paragraph 2.70-020 definitions, subparagraph D, I would change the word group to entity.
I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. So does everyone know where we're at here? I have page 404 of our packet, page 3 of the ordinance, 2.70020 definitions, subparagraph D, volunteer group. The word group would be struck and the word entity would be inserted. Is that clear?
Just as an informational point, if that change is made, we would follow through with the rest of the ordinance to conform the language to what you pass.
Okay, because the word volunteer group is used throughout. Okay, so the staff would have that right to make those changes where the word volunteer group, the words volunteer group, it will be changed to volunteer entity if this amendment passes. Is there any further discussion on this amendment? All those in favor of the amendment changing the word group to entity signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? The amendment is passed. So is there any further discussion on Ordinance number 845 as amended. Councilmember Pearson.
A brief comment. Very supportive of this. I think that when you look back at what happened out at the end of 100th Street a year or two ago, something like this being in place, I think would have really gone a long ways into helping make sure that we're staying in permit compliance in the shoreline and that whole thing. So I think that this is going to go a long ways into helping make it easier for folks to adequately maintain street ends and keep those permits and projects active on an annual basis. So I am in support of it.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am supportive of this. I think that having buy-in from your community is very important, and it will be structured underneath the city. And like Councilmember Laura Sella pointed out, that it is still under the confines of the city. We do still have oversight of it. There's going to be rules, there's going to be regulations, there's going to be things that can be followed. And again, it's really nice to be involved in your area and your space in cleaning up things and having some buy-in that. And I just really think that volunteer programs, they foster a lot for our neighborhood programs also, which we have been growing by leaps and bounds these last few years. So I'm really looking forward to the program and seeing what the benefits will be from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really just wanted to say, thank you to our staff and for working on this. I do remember hearing and sitting through the many comments that came to council a year ago or longer, asking for a program like this and asking for these revisions and asking for options and help. And I'd just like to say this council heard you and has made its effort. So thank you for speaking up and thank you for coming forward. And I look forward to helping these groups in any way that they want our assistance to get started. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I too want to express my appreciation to staff and also to WCIA folks that helped us in terms of putting this together, and so that we could come up with a volunteer program that both provided some insurance coverage to the city and to volunteers, but that also didn't create any, other than signing an agreement with the city, it didn't require any onerous permitting or anything else on the part of volunteers. And so I think it'll be well received, and if we can in relatively short order get the lists of available sites published, and we can begin to implement this, I think it'll help with attracting volunteers, not just to street ends, but to the other two types of locations, because I think that there are, particularly the Adopt a Site program is, there are plenty of places of where someone might want to do that in their neighborhood, but that aren't actually being taken care of, or where people are doing it without city acknowledgement. But I'm glad we're at this point today.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstetter, and thank you for pointing that out. This is a broader ordinance than just dealing with street ends. That this is really something that we've probably needed in this city for a long time. And I know I appreciate staff's work, and I thank Councilmember Brandstetter for talking about our partnership with the WCIA. With that, I'm supposed to do a voice vote, aren't I? I just moved a division right away. We'll do a voice vote this time. All those in favor of ordinance number 845 as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. So ordinance number 845 is passed. Thank you. Any unfinished business, Mr. City Manager? Any new business, Mr. City Manager? So we'll move on to items for discussion. And tonight, we're going to receive a presentation about the unified regional approach to addressing homelessness. And Ms. Spear, we're going to start out with you, and you're going to make the introduction, because until I hear this individual's first name, I'm not sure whether to pronounce it Liza, like Manelli. Oh, that's great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, and members of the council. So I have a brief introductory memo that's included in your packet, starting on page 406, just to state that where we sit today is a homeless system, if you will, within Pierce County, where you have three separate entities: the Greater Pierce County Continuum of Care, which is authorized and funded by federal dollars. You have Pierce County's system, and a state-required county-wide comprehensive plan that has to get updated every 5 years related to homelessness. And then you have the various jurisdictions, the cities and towns other than the county, each also having their own budgets, approaches, techniques to handle homelessness issues in their city. In March of 2022, the Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness was adopted by the Pierce County Council, and it included 6 goals, the first of which was to create a, quote, unified regional approach. And what that was intended to mean was to have various jurisdictions within the county working together in some way, not a lot of detail, and that is actually, fast forward to today, still not fully fleshed out, but the idea is to try to have some sort of better coordinated system, because those that are experiencing homelessness don't necessarily see geographic boundaries and are across the county. So tonight, what we have is a presentation that will come from Liza Burrell from Uncommon Bridges. She's one of the lead staff people from that organization, helping the county move the Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness URA effort forward this year. On page 407, you'll see kind of the end goal and rough Venn diagram, where you still have continuum of care, a 5-year homeless housing program and plan under the county, and then cities programs as well. But what you see there is this unified regional approach now becomes a unifying item that in some way would help all of those jurisdictions work together a little more closely. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Burrell.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. And Ms. Burrell,
Yes.
welcome to the Lakewood City Council. I'll point out that Councilmember Brandstetter is already involved in this activity, the unified regional approach. I'd like you to first start out and tell us what organization is Uncommon Bridges.
Sure. Thank you. And good evening, everybody. Good evening, Council. Yeah, so Uncommon Bridges, we're a consulting firm. We do a lot of consensus-based facilitation and trying to move processes forward through facilitation. So we were brought on because homelessness is a gnarly issue. Folks suffer from it every day, and it's very hard to solve. I think I will just start with that. And Uncommon Bridges, we really do try to come together. We know that everyone around homelessness is not going to be aligned. Jurisdictions are not necessarily going to be aligned. But essentially, what can we do together and start moving forward is really the goal. So Uncommon Bridges, we're a small consulting firm out of Seattle. We do a lot of work here in Pierce County, as well as in many other places in Washington State. So good evening. My name is Liza Burrell. I am the program and policy lead for Uncommon Bridges and the project manager for this project. So what I wanted to share with you all today is an overview of the project, what we've done to date, what's emerging as a URA draft or Unified Regional Approach draft. My apologies, I will probably say URA a lot because Unified Regional Approach is a mouthful. And as Tiffany just pointed out, it is still emerging. It is not finalized, that design. And then lastly, the timeline through 2026. So first and foremost, this project, the purpose of this project is to agree on and launch a more unified response to homelessness across Pierce County. we think it's super important to state from the beginning that this is not a study. Y'all have done a lot of studies. There's a lot of really good documents around homelessness in Pierce County. But this is really more than that, or it's different than that. It's about making a deal between jurisdictions and getting started on what we can do together. So the first thing I wanted to say is to situate us. From the beginning, it was clear that this was not going to be a new bureaucratic entity. We are not talking about creating a brand new office of something. This was really, how can our jurisdictions within Pierce County work better together around certain activities so that we are aligned and better coordinated, so we create some efficiencies as well as effectiveness. And another thing that I just want to raise up that Tiffany said, as well as some clarity and transparency between jurisdictions, but also for folks, that for our neighbors that are living unhoused, so that they know where to go and how to get served. So we early on in the project, we got together a group of elected leaders from 11 different jurisdictions in Pierce County. You'll see a slide, a couple slides that sort of shows the project structure and who's on that elected leadership group. Councilmember Branstetter is, thank you so much for your service on that task force or that group. So the elected leadership group is really the decision-making body of this project. How I like to think about it is they're the ones that are making the sandbox. Like this is our guidelines. So they set out a vision and guiding principles for this project and for a unified regional approach. So it is to substantially reduce homelessness so that it is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. There are, as you can see, 12 different guiding principles. My project partner, Brian, would say he was hoping for 6. We got 12. But we really do try to bring those principles into the work that we're doing in all of the various groups for this project. I think those principles will also be very useful in setting up the unified regional approach. And again, those principles came from elected leaders from across various jurisdictions in Pierce County. So the project, I'll show you a more detailed project timeline at the end. But this project has 3 phases. It's a long project, it's 2 years. We started at the very end of October of 2024. And we did scoping, which really included talking to a lot of elected leaders from across Pierce County to understand what's getting in the way, what are the problems, what are the pain points, and what do they think unifying could be helpful for. So that was our scoping phase, to try to just get our heads around what's going on. Then we've done a number of months, almost a year, of design, which includes circling up a number of task forces that created a lot of recommendations, having our elected leadership group see different iterations of design and give us feedback, as well as importantly, having our staff planning group, which Tiffany Spears sits on, to help us both support the elected leaders and also with just some feasibility questions around design pieces. So we are about to wrap up design. We're hoping that we will wrap it up by the end of March, and then we will start implementing, which really does include getting an interlocal agreement written and signed, or at least a resolution towards an interlocal agreement signed between or among jurisdictions in Pierce County. So this was the structure, or this is the structure for the project. As I shared, there's the elected leadership group, which Councilmember Branstetter sits on, supported by the staff planning group, which Tiffany Spear sits on. We really did want to have, the elected leadership group was created by, essentially it's a table of the willing. It was our client specifically is Pierce County Council. They're the ones that hired Uncommon Bridges, and our marching order was a table of the willing. How do we get this moving forward into something? So part of the scoping was also sussing out who is willing to come to a table and be part of this project. So we were thrilled that Lakewood was, so thank you so much for being part of the sausage making, so to speak, on the project. Both those groups are supported by task forces. Those task forces were set up in 3 different areas: governance, finance, and operations, as those are 3 areas that will be super important in unifying a regional approach to homelessness. Those task forces have met. They met 6 times, and they are full of folks with who work in jurisdictional governments, work in close system partners that could be behavioral health, physical health. There are folks that we had law enforcement in those. We had homeless service providers, and we also had people with lived experience of homelessness. And those task forces were really the detail. We know our elected officials don't have the time and capacity to know all the detail, and our staff planning group also, they've got other jobs. So it's really those task forces that we relied on to help us understand current context and then what could be different. So just thought you might want to see who's on what table. The elected leadership group is, you could see everybody on there. And then the staff planning group, you can only see their names. Sorry about that. And then you can't see the task forces because that was too tiny to fit. But I am happy to share all of that with everybody. So why unify? Why should we even do this? So we actually, part of the project team, we have a national expert in homelessness called HRNA. They're another consulting firm. And we've partnered with them on this project to really be our technical experts. And what they really wanted to let us know and let the elected leadership group know early on is that there are, if you can unify even pieces of your homeless response across a jurisdiction as large as Pierce County, you will find some efficiencies and effectiveness that even if no more money goes to the systems, there can be better outcomes. So I am not advocating for no more money. I'm just saying that was something we heard. So what's really important about what are the components of regional approaches is real-time flow of data. It's very hard to know how to handle this issue if we don't even have our hands around the issue, right? So we need everyone using the same databases, understanding how to use the data, and being able to see what's going on around homelessness response in our system. Also having coordinated efforts around common goals, common understanding of the need, share approaches to services and planning. Importantly, coordinated approach around accountability and evaluation, and then ideally common approaches towards state and federal funding. One of the big things that came through in this is there an opportunity here to really go after, to support funding by having Pierce County jurisdictions go together to Olympia or go together to Washington, D.C., and really so that the funding is not just city by city, but can be across the whole region. So importantly, the elected leadership group, again, as I said earlier, the focus here is not creating a whole new bureaucratic entity. It is focusing on activities. What can we do at an activity level, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, that can create more effectiveness and efficiencies? So we had a big meeting. We launched the project in March of last year. And what we learned, we broke the, there was about 60 people there from various jurisdictions. Some of you hopefully were there. And really what we wanted to understand is what are the pain points? What are the problems that folks are seeing, and what would be useful in a unified approach? So for a long time in this project, we called these the 11 problems to solve. But essentially they are, there's not a single process of assessment and entry into the homeless system. There's not shared data. Everyone that works in homelessness is not using the same data system. Most are, but not everyone is. Not everyone has access to it. And also some jurisdictions might want access to it, but do not have that access right now. How can we make contract language more standard so our service providers and our jurisdictions that are funding do not have to spend so much time through procurement processes? And then standard operating procedures. How do we have shared language, shared definitions across jurisdictions? Because as Tiffany eloquently said, folks who are experiencing homelessness do not really identify jurisdictional divides in the same way that others might. In governance, we know we're going to have to set up some structure. So we are talking about an interlocal agreement there will be structure and authority, and there will be individual jurisdictional engagement. Importantly, and from the beginning, that is voluntary. Nothing here is mandatory. And then in finance, there was a lot of discussion around the need for transparency around resources, who's funding what where. Also going back to that idea of new and sustainable revenue, is there a way for us to have more power in collective voice to get more revenue into Pierce County for what we need to support homeless response efforts? And then a regional approach to service contracts looks a lot like that standard contract language, but again, one day, this is not now, but one day, could there be joint service contracts? So again, jurisdictional governments and providers don't have to spend so much time in the procurement processes. So that's the project overview. I want to talk a little bit about the emerging concept. Let me just jump to my notes. Give me one moment. So importantly, when we talk about this project and what is going to emerge from it, we talk about it as small, voluntary, and incremental. Small being the size of the staff. We do, even though we said we're not going to build a whole new bureaucracy or jurisdiction, coordination takes effort. I think that's demonstrated here. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes capacity. We cannot expect existing staff that already have plates full to do that. So we are suggesting an entity of some kind, which will be staff. So that's the small part, small staff. Voluntary, this is carrots. This is why joining something that is unified and regional could support Lakewood. This is not sticks about if you don't join, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. We also are hopeful that jurisdictions that are not ready or able or willing to be part of it in the beginning will come along as time goes on. So that's also incremental. There's not a, if you're not in now, you're never in, not at all. Please come whenever you're ready. That was the voluntary, I think, or incremental is also part of that. But the other part I want to say about incremental is not only when jurisdictions can come on, but it's also, we know the proof is in the pudding, right? There's been a lot of things tried around homelessness. Homelessness is a very challenging issue that's affecting and impacting every jurisdiction in our country. It's also impacting millions of humans in our country. And so we know that there has to be proof points. So that's also part of the incremental, is knowing that jurisdictions might want to be like, well, let's see what you do. And let's see how this is creating some of those efficiencies. So I just want to share those three words, small, voluntary, and incremental. So again, the URA is a unified regional approach to substantially reduce homelessness. So there's rare, brief, and non-recurring. So there are a lot of problems we think a unified regional approach will solve. And we've done a lot of work, both from the scoping phase throughout. Now we've done a lot of presentations to various groups, all of the groups that Tiffany mentioned in the introduction for me. And we've also learned a lot from service providers around the issues that are impacting their ability to do their work, and folks who are experiencing homelessness, their ability to get services and find services. So what we've heard from individuals is it feels to them like it's a disconnected system. They have to tell their story again and again. And it seems like their file or their MyChart, so to speak, is not following them. They also don't know what is happening. They don't get any feedback about, I filled out that form, I have no idea what's next. For service providers, it's some of the same. It's disconnected data. Not everyone's using the same data systems. And it can be really hard to find where people are getting services. There's also, this goes back to the shared contracting, inconsistent requirements and policies from various funders, again, is a burden for our service providers. And then for jurisdictions, it's the state and federal funding requirements might be misaligned with local need, with what you need right here in Lakewood. And jurisdictions are also obviously have a problem or have issues serving folks beyond their boundaries. But as we have been saying, folks who are unhoused move. So just a couple call outs. This is just some quotes about what we heard when we were talking to people. Just, I want to knock on just one door, not 10. I never get to talk to the same person twice. and they should all have access to the same information, but it doesn't seem like they do. So in this, for this emerging concept, we have what we're talking about is base level cooperation, like how are we going to work together? And we do need, or there is an interlocal agreement is needed for that, for governments to legally work together in a way. This will define authority, decision-making, commitments. Importantly, we are looking to make an interlocal agreement that is as general as possible. This is not, we don't want a lot of specifics in there. Things change all the time. We don't want to have to go through a new ILA process every time we change a data system or we get we change the inclement weather threshold or something like that. That doesn't make any sense. So the ILA will be as broad as possible, but there will be memorandums of understanding, which will be much more specific. They can be between jurisdictions. If two jurisdictions decide they want to stand up a shelter together, they can enter an MOU together, as an example. But the MOUs will be much more specific than the ILA. And that's to get some base level cooperation. We also know, and going back to this whole point, is activities. What can we do together? What can we do together? So this is a list. I should have numbered that instead of bulleted that. 9 activities that have been identified as possibilities of how a unified regional approach can work together. These are the same things that you saw in the problems to solve, just sort of said in a different way. Importantly, we think we can get started on 3 of them this year. And this is before the URA stands up, but we think the consulting team, as well as the project teams that we've laid out, feel like we can make some headway in data standards and sharing, see if we can get every provider to use the same database. So we have one database of truth around homelessness. Also work on the universal process of assessment and entry so that all jurisdictions know how they engage with folks who are unhoused, and that is shared from jurisdiction to jurisdiction for transparency so that jurisdictions can understand what their fellow jurisdictions are doing. And the last one is standardizing and implementing inclement weather procedures so that we can, again, as a whole jurisdiction of Pierce County, really align on how we respond when the weather gets dangerous for folks who are living outside. The rest of those are beyond 2026 and will be fodder for the unified regional approach when it stood up. Importantly, I just want to say these are not new programs. So these things do exist in some way, but they haven't been coordinated. They haven't been necessarily there hasn't been engagement with a number of jurisdictions. So we see this all as an opportunity to get more jurisdictions working together, again, to create more efficiencies and effectiveness. So what is oversight of this going to look like? At this moment in time, we are proposing a governance board representing partner jurisdictions. So those jurisdictions that decide to be part of the URA will have a member on the governance board. At this point, that board is most likely going to be elected officials, though we do have 2 more meetings of the elected leadership group in February and March to really nail this down. There will be limited staffing, as I shared. Right now, it's looking like 2 to 3 positions. Some people talk about, if y'all are familiar with SHAPE, the SHAPE model, South Sound Housing Affordability Partners. Thank you, Tiffany. So that's a near example. Limited funding. There does need to be funding for just those limited staff roles. But right at this point, the funding is for that. It is not for services. If that would be pooled funding, and that would happen after 2026, if it happens. And then a legal structure. Right now, the elected leadership group really feels pretty good that it should be within Pierce County. But it needs to have an independent oversight by the governing board. So that's where we're looking at. Again, the elected leadership group is still grappling with these. So, and then the design concept, just recap, so everything I've gone through. The URA is to substantially reduce homelessness. We're trying to solve some problems around finding services, repeating traumatic stories, information that's not accessible or everyone's not using the same database, and inconsistent requirements and policies. We think the solutions are to begin small, voluntary, and incremental. We want to start by getting some early wins and early opportunities for jurisdictions to work together on data standards and sharing, universal assessment, and inclement weather. We will be working towards an interlocal agreement for this structure, and then more coordinated activities over time once the entity gets stood up. Timeline. So we are in February, draft design. Next Wednesday, we are bringing the next iteration of the draft design to the elected leadership group for their feedback. We are hoping to have a final design approved by them at the end of March. So this shows we're going to be doing a lot of jurisdictional engagement. I'm really hoping, and you'll be hearing from us, to work with your city manager and others here in Lakewood to see how we can make some of these real here, or if we can make some of these real here. So that's a lot of the jurisdictional engagement. We're also going to be working on the formation, which is an interlocal agreement, but we and the elected leadership group feels pretty strongly that might be really challenging to get through this year. So they want to start with a resolution, and we're hoping to get that resolution finalized in May. And basically the resolution will be a precursor to the ILA. We, starting around August, will start to develop the board, the URA board, and the staffing, job descriptions, et cetera. And then throughout that, from May on, we'll be working on those coordinated activities. So that is our project timeline, our implementation timeline for this last phase. We do have a project website, which has a whole bunch of information, including every meeting we've had, a meeting summary, and the PowerPoint from that meeting, as well as a bunch of visuals we created to try to demonstrate what the current systems and processes look like here in Pierce County. Brian is my partner on this project. He's on vacation, so I'm here. And I am Liza at Uncommon Bridges. And really, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burrell. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Burrell? Councilmember Lauricella.
Thank you, Mayor Boki, and thanks, Ms. Burrell, for coming in. Super important topic, and it's backed by a lot of our local heavy hitters at the county and various cities. My question coming out of this is, how do you measure success, and how do you know you're focused on the right levers to really make a difference?
So I'm going to answer that in the immediate. I mean, my immediate thing would be an ILA. That's not immediate, but that's this year. I think, frankly, getting everyone on one database, one single database where we can have the same data standards and measures. Did I just turn this off with my mouth?
No, you're still good. Okay,
great, thanks. I think that is going to be crucial to getting to what you're saying. The whole having a unified approach where jurisdictions in Pierce County have some skin in the game, where it's not solely the jurisdictions that fund something, or not solely the providers that are doing the work. I think that is the opportunity to really come up with what are our Pierce County-wide metrics we want to see. So if right now our permanent housing outcome is 30%, I made that up, I don't know if that's true, we want it to move to 50%. So I think there are things, Councilmember Lauricella, that we know we need to move people into permanent housing. We need to expand shelters so less people are outside. We need to, so I think, but it's going to be up to the unified regional approach and the jurisdictions that are willing to be part of that to come up with those metrics that are really going to determine, is this working, is this not working, and then hopefully go back down and be like, okay, what lever? Because this is what we tried and it didn't work.
Gotcha. So,
And that's what's I'm sorry, but that's also what's missing because there's no unification. It's Pierce County Human Services does this, City of Lakewood does this, Puyallup does that. You know, so will take work to coordinate it all.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, we're multiple steps away from the actual implementation that helps people on the street. Do we have,
Absolutely.
or do you have examples in other jurisdictions across the country where this unified approach has driven success and driven metrics that solve the
Yes.
systemic problems?
Yes, and we can come back and share that, or we can just share it via email.
Yeah, email's fine.
Yeah.
To understand
Yeah.
that
we
there is
do.
data
Our
behind this.
national partner again did put together a number. Houston, LA, Connecticut have done some regional approaches that again have created enough efficiencies that have just improved things. And some of like the whole state of Connecticut has done it. So yeah, I'm happy to get you some stuff on those.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Laura Sella. Is there any other questions for Ms. Brown? Oh, Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Burrell. For the uninitiated, when you say data standards and sharing, can you give examples of the data that you're talking about?
Yes. So it would be questions like everything from name, date of birth, household number, those kind of things, to last address you lived at, like when you paid rent. It could be where did you stay last night. It's also data standards like when someone moves into housing, this is how you mark it in this database so that we all know that this person moved into housing. So it's basically getting all users of the homeless management information system to have the same way they input the data, and then ideally, which has not really been the case yet, an opportunity to get reports back so they can do their own quality checks too, which that's just an aside.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. And then when on the slide where where you referenced the steps for, yes, this one for adoption and full adoption, are you looking for, is part of the process that each city will provide a resolution of support for an ILA, or is the step that to bring the resolution that was created by the URA organization back to the cities for adoption?
It's B.
Yeah. Okay.
But the resolution's actually being drafted currently by Pierce County Council staff, but it will go in front of the elected leadership group before it goes anywhere else. So the idea is that a resolution is created that is shared with jurisdictions rather than y'all creating your own resolution.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Great, thank you very much, Ms. Burrell. We look forward. There's a lot of new money in this space over the last, 5 years or so. ARPA money is beginning to run off, but so I'm glad everyone's working towards, or almost everyone is working towards really coming to a much more unified approach, much more efficient approach, I think, when we're able to tell people, because I think there's really good examples of it not really being efficient. In fact, one of the words you'd come up with the homelessness, trying to solve it is inefficiencies, I guess, is one of the things that would come to mind in my mind anyway. So, good intentions, but not necessarily efficient, or in some cases, not necessarily effective. And I think that we risk losing public support because of that. So really appreciate the efforts of your group, and I'm sure Councilmember Branstadter's helping out in really trying to figure this out. And we wish you all the success in the world, because your success is our success, and we're in this together. So I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. So next up, I guess we have Ms. Spear again, the planning manager, Ms. Tiffany Spear, establishment of a natural environment and climate change program advisory community board. We talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. So Ms. Spear, we're all ears.
Thank you. And once again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Tiffany Spear. The information that we're going to touch base on now starts on page 430 in your packet. And there's a couple of items to it. There's the cover memo, and then there's two attachments, one of which is a draft ordinance and another is a draft motion. Neither are ready for action by any means. This is a conversation for you to have. But to provide your feedback on either one or the other of those maybe as our next steps. So on January 12th, there was a conversation held by the City Council regarding the Natural Environment and Climate Change Program, whereby there was direction given back to the PPW department to look at creating an advisory community board to the City Council. And so what you have in the discussion that starts on page 430 and then in attachment A is a draft ordinance that would create a new advisory board for the council that would be focused specifically on the urban forestry program and the other related environmental issues that are currently required to be addressed by the city under House Bill 1181 at the state level. This would be, if it were created as a new advisory board, it would be the 11th to the city council. It would be a matter of deciding once the council said, yes, we want to do this, which department would be in charge or would staff it, if you will. The city manager would be making that decision. And then what you also will see is on page 431, the tasks that the work plan for this new advisory board would include in 2026, because they, like the other advisory boards that are in place already, would operate based on an approved work plan per the city council. So about in the middle of page 431, you'd see it would be recommending items out of the original 2021 Climate Action Plan. If you recall, there were about 89 action items originally identified. Some have been completed. Some may no longer even be relevant. It's been 5 years now since that process happened. But in order to create a 10-year implementation plan and a shorter 3 to 5 year work plan, it would be a matter of starting with those action items and prioritizing them, maybe streamlining them, etc. It would be dealing with public outreach strategies and also seeking and integrating feedback from various communities within the city. Looking to them to be ambassadors for the urban forestry program, working with climate engagement efforts to help map the vulnerability assessment in different parts of the city for climate change risks. It would be looking at the city's urban heat resilience strategy and resilient planting plan, both of which are required by state law. And then over time, also continuing to monitor and provide advisory support regarding the city's urban forestry plan. So again, option one would be an ordinance, and then you see on the bottom of page 431 onto page 432, a potential schedule for moving that forward. It would be moving your way through study sessions, having it go through public hearing and review, and then once that board were approved, then becomes the process of developing a work plan, which would then be approved by city council, and then action taken on that to move forward. So as of now, this schedule is looking at maybe an October 1st rough timeframe for when that advisory board would begin functioning. Option B, which is then starting on page 432 and included in attachment B, would be actually to take a look at the Planning Commission as serving as this board. And this was an option that came to light as the city staff were looking at creating this new board, because we went through and looked at the authority and scope for other advisory boards for comparison's sake. And what we found is that within the Planning Commission's current scope and authority, there is a way to incorporate all of those things that a separate advisory board might do within its own work. And it would also create some efficiencies, because under city code right now, the Planning Commission already has authority over a number of the items in the Natural Environment and Climate Change Program. So if you were to create a separate advisory board and they were to make a recommendation, it would need to go to the Planning Commission and then up to you for legislative action. So the idea here was to have in front of you an option to look at the Planning Commission instead of creating a new board. If that were the case, the process would be to look at amending its 2026 work plan to incorporate these tasks. That would be a faster process than what would need to happen to create a new advisory board and then its work plan. And then also starting on the bottom of 432 on through 434, you'll see the discussion about the chapter within the municipal code that creates the planning commission, its authority and its scope of responsibility, if you will. You'll see also that there's a rules of procedure adopted for planning commission that talks about it is able already to create task forces or standing or temporary committees. And so those may be appropriate for this program as well. So attachment B is actually a motion that could be taken should the council wish to do this going forward to amend the work plan for the planning commission to incorporate the program responsibility at that level instead. So with that, Mr. Mayor, turning it back over to council for discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. Are there any questions for Ms. Spear in her presentation? Other questions? Councilmember Branstetter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Ms. Spear, I guess that I appreciate the fact that you came to us with two options about how to create this board, being able to go and do that. I would could you reiterate how staff views the pros and cons of the two options?
How we used it?
Yeah, I know that there are two options, but what does staff see as the pros and cons of establishing a separate board to work on over time on these issues, or of adding the responsibilities of what we want done to the planning commission? Well, yeah, I mean, you're asking us to decide between the two of them, so I'm wondering what the pros and cons are.
The new advisory board would be, I'll be very frank, if you look at a pluses and minuses list, there's probably more minuses to it administratively, because it would require additional effort and resources to staff that, inform it, have it scheduled, have it work. So there's those types of issues that we would be looking at internally. But it's also, there are positives there where you could have subject matter experts assigned or appointed to the board. You could have particular events or community engagement with that board that would be separate and apart from any other advisory board. And so that, I guess, is a focus on those items specifically that not only are the 1181 requirements and specifically our urban forestry program, but things that the city council has been approached about by members of the public for years regarding environmental concerns. If you look at the planning commission, again, it's already a standing board, it's in place, it's functioning as it is, and it already takes a look at, has authority over many of the items that would be considered part of the NEC program, the Natural Environment and Climate Change Program. The environmental, the critical area, the tree preservation ordinances, the heat resilience sorts of things that would require a change potentially in code. All of that is stuff that already goes through the Planning Commission. So by creating a separate board, you would have another step that would still come to the Planning Commission in any event. The Planning Commission's authority and its ability under its rules of procedure to create a task force or an ad hoc committee, they could call those same people that would be on a separate board and be part of a group with them. There is no assumption in the language of what we're suggesting in attachment B, where if the Planning Commission took this on, they would not engage anyone else in the community. The idea is that they would have the ability through their existing authority to pull those subject matter experts in for specific discussions, for specific efforts over time, et cetera. So it's really a matter for the council to decide, Do you want to have that standing group separate and apart from not only the planning commission, but for instance, your park and recreation board? You have also, for instance, the American Lake, I'm going to get his name wrong, management
Like-
board. So you have several other groups that potentially cover some of these topics as well. The Youth Council, we've made a presentation recently to them about the NEC program, and they also expressed interest in being involved. Or do you use the planning commission and let it kind of work within its purview that it already has and expand what it would do in order to cover these things in a way that they need to be covered, particularly between now and 2029? I guess the last thing I would say is that, yes, this would affect the planning commission's work plan, but as it stands, you have a pretty well-rounded set of members of that by intention, by council appointment, that cover various interests that are addressed in the NEC program, but you also have the ability for them to hold public hearings, to have special study sessions, to have special events as part of their meetings as well.
Okay, thank you. And maybe my last question is, what is your goal today? Are you asking us to make a decision on a preference between the two options, or are you just informing us that there are two options?
No, this meeting today is bringing back to you two things. One was specifically what was requested by council back in January with the idea of creating a new board, but then also as we did that research, this other option surfaced. And so it's up to the council. This is by no means ready for action. This is something where you would have as much time with deliberation as you would like, decide how you want to handle this going forward.
Okay, thank you. And maybe if we're going to discuss amongst ourselves later, after we're done questioning Ms. Spear, we might have some comments.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any more questions for Ms. Spear? And then after that, we can get into the comment portion. Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. So the one question I did want to ask and understand is on page 433, when it comes to task forces, the Planning Commission may establish special task forces to investigate community issues. The commission may initiate a task force on their own or at the direction of council. So as far as the membership of the task force, if there is, under that scenario, the council and or the commission can decide the makeup of the task force as far as whether they come from other boards and commissions or whether they can be, whether there's an open invitation to the community at large to join the task force.
Under this language of 7A is what you're talking about, Commissioner, or excuse me, Councilmember Talbot. Yes, that as it reads, the commission could do that on its own or the council could provide direction. And I would assume that if you were to move forward with this option and you were looking to amend their work plan, there could be direction at that time to them to say, if you start to move down this path and are looking to create a task force or an ad hoc, this is what the council would like to see. So that's in front of them when they start that conversation.
So it could include an invitation to the public to
Yes.
be on the task force.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Ms. Spear? Okay, so I think she's asking us, and staff in general is asking us kind of where our preferences lie. So if anyone would like to take a crack kind of at where you'd like to see this go, because we've had an introduction to this a couple weeks ago, and now now we have two options to talk about. So Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so in staying on topic with government efficiencies and inefficiencies, I think that option B, routing this through the Planning Commission, doesn't increase the burden, the administrative burden as much. I mean, anything's going to, add more work to staff, but this, I think, lightens it. That's not really the main benefit here. That's just a piece of it. I think really all of this work aligns with what the Planning Commission does as part of their statutory role. They deal with land use, regulations, long-range planning, shoreline codes, all of these things already that are all pieces to this. So it would make sense for like holistically to have them be involved in this as well. You know, climate policy is fundamentally a land use issue. So all of these things are, you know, what currently is part of the Planning Commission's work plan, and I think would integrate in well. You know, these relate to zoning, housing, transportation, shorelines, all of this stuff. So, and then the Planning Commission, you know, it's a public forum for folks to come in and comment on things that are before them. You know, they hold hearings and a number of other things. So I think that it's the right fit, and makes a ton of sense and provides some flexibility on how they go about doing it too. So I would be supportive of option B.
Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. Councilmember Lauricella.
Thank you, Mayor Boki. I will speak in opposition of Councilmember Pearson's perspective on this. I feel like this should be an advisory board made up not from members of our Planning Commission. I think public perception of our Planning Commission is that a lot of folks there are pro-development, whether that's factually true or not. I know that's been the perception I've heard from others in the community. And I think that this sort of task force or this advisory board would be better served by creating a cross-sectional team of non-experts in Lakewood that can then consult with experts in the field and make educated decisions based on that. I think it should be similar to our other advisory boards, independent of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lauricella. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think that I too am more inclined to pursue option A. And one of the reasons for that is that first of all, for a decade or more, we have constantly, as we have surveyed the citizenry, the residents about what things do they see important, you know, the natural features and natural environment is always somewhere close to the top. And that there is what I think is a arguably accurate perception that that when there are issues being worked out, whether they're land use issues or something else, that natural environment issues tend to be, when they are considered, secondary. And I think that creating a separate advisory board that can have less formality in terms of the public interacting with than the Planning Commission rules allow would, you know, open us up to some transparency going forward, particularly once we get back satisfying the immediate state legislative requirements, but we take a look about around the natural environment of shaping Lakewood in the way that residents would like to see. And we haven't really had a good set of voices to do that. I think the criticizing voices that we occasionally or even frequently hear at city council meetings don't necessarily represent the broader voice of the community always, but they don't necessarily have a real voice, way to express it. So and while I admit that some things that might be recommended to us by this board would then result in actions that would also be reviewed by the planning commission, that's reality and good, but it doesn't mean, but we're not relying on the planning commission to come up with them, okay, in that way, to be able to go and do that. So I think we would gain greater transparency. We would be able to communicate within the community our sincere desire to move forward and make positive actions going forward within the caring for our natural environment, being able to go and do that. And we may also be able to clarify some of the getting it a board that has, as a part of its role, being ambassadors to the community around this issue, to both communicate what's going on, but also to hear back the actions of that. We would be better off doing that. I would just point out with the timeline for creating that board, I think that there would be a good bit of interest in wanting to be on it in the community, and it would include people who, by professional skills, by education, by already ongoing volunteer efforts, a good mix of people who provide expertise to be able to be on that board. I wouldn't think that we would need to have, as was suggested in the memo, a review of all the applications by the council. I think that the standard process of appointing such a board of applicants apply, and the mayor works through his whatever process he determines to be able to select members of it to be able to go and do. I might think we can discuss in the future whether 7 is the right number or whether 9 or works better given the breadth of climate change and natural environment issues. But I would think that we can make good impression on the community and expand our communications with the community around these issues by establishing a board that we say we want to be the one that is reaching out to our community and talking with us about it, and for whom we can ask questions to go out and research. So would really like to pursue, in Ms. Spears' 2 options, option A.
Thank you, Councilmember Branstad. Are there any other? Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate hearing from my council members both perspectives. I do tend to agree that option A offers far more transparency and even engagement with the community. I recognize that even though the process will take longer, and I'm sorry if staff feels that it's a more burdensome, that it creates more burdensomeness. But I do think that it's the right thing for the community to invite and also get the benefit of more, I think, concentrated subject matter expertise than you would be able to get with the subject matter expertise on the planning commission even though, yes, I agree with Councilmember Pearson that yes, the Planning Commission's statute and role in land use issues and how climate change impacts our land use, our in land use. But at the same time, I think that the science in in environmental and ecological matters is really important. And that's where we need the subject matter expertise to augment our feedback loop from our advisory boards and commissions, because we just don't have that pocket of subject matter expertise with us right now. And when we talk about, we hear from the community about wanting to see a more engaged council, feel more engaged with the community, see more transparency and accountability. And I think that separate advisory board is a better method of doing that. So I agree with Councilmember Brandstetter, and I thank you for your comments because you said all the things more eloquently than I could have. I could only support option B if the creation of a task force is invitational to the public at large, and that the selection of those task force members is also able to be transparent and accessible, maybe outside of the Planning Commission. What I'm trying to get at is that I think I wouldn't want to see the creation of a task force in a box. I think that there needs to be some transparency there. So with that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Deputy Mayor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, all my fellow council members, for the comments. I really appreciate your perspective on everything. My one concern would be is when we create separate task force and advisories, that we don't get the subject matter experts that to apply and to be on these boards that we need. Yes, I do love the transparency. I love opening it up, giving it more voices throughout the community, not just what people perceive, and then asking people, regular residents, also to be a part of it. But again, I just don't want to miss out on those subject matter experts that we do already have on the Planning Commission. So that would be my concern and my ask of a possible advisory, a possible task force, that it does have that on there. So we do have some voice, some knowledge, and some wisdom on there for some guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councilmember, now that everybody's talked, yes, you can go. Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one kind of follow-up. I think that the task force ran through the Planning Commission, can strike a balance of if they need support on specific technical matters, to get the feedback from putting together a task force, but it really, and they can get subject matter experts involved in different areas. But I think that having it through the Planning Commission really is like a holistic approach to making sure that they're seeing and touching other things that are, ancillary to what's going on with just this narrow focused group, that there's other, planning elements and land use codes and other, shoreline things that need to change, or this needs to change. Like they kind of are the overarching group that this should reside under. And I think that if the concern is subject matter experts, then we can get those involved through the task force and subcommittees through the Planning Commission. So that's just my comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. So I'm a little cautious about this is just one person's opinion. I'm a little bit cautious about creating a brand new committee for just the basic reasons stated. You've got a committee that then needs to be staffed, that will want to meet 1 or 2 times a month. Assume that every single council meeting, every single committee meeting is, $1,000 plus to put together for staff. I'm looking at what their charge would be. Seems very broad to me, or it could be interpreted as being very broad. I do worry about, and I've seen this in my other walks of life. When you set up committees and you say, okay, here's your world, and then those items, as noted, rub up against what the Planning Commission is doing. In this case, it would be the Planning Commission. I don't think that they would have any issues with any of the other committees. That then they become very disappointed in the process, right? Because it's like, you told us we can combat climate change, and now you're telling me that this has to go through the Planning Commission, or that's the Planning Commission's area. So I'm in my mind, it's still not. If I was a citizen, you said, "Hey, be on this committee," I think I would be, well, what exactly are, okay, so I get it, the tree thing, right? Which we've talked about ad nauseum for several years now. The urban forest management plan, which I think we're finally getting to now. I get that. Heat resilience, I get that. And then it's this other 97-point climate action plan. Okay, so do we have the right to just start picking pieces up? Do I have the right to show up to a committee meeting and say, hey, next time we show up, I want to talk about items 52, 53, and 54. And then staff has to say, well, no, that's not really what you're here to talk about, right? Well, are we here to talk about it? It says, so I'm a little bit unclear as to what the charge of this committee will do that will keep it out of everybody else's issues, right? And we do have a history of this, right? We got rid of one committee that actually came up with plans that were different than the Planning Commission's plans, right? We had that reconstruction committee or whatever it was. And so we had staff going in 2 directions. So I'm concerned about that. I just don't think that this thing is ready to get baked yet, that the cake is ready to be baked. But there are issues that need to be dealt with. The urban forest management plan being the large one there. So how do we do that? And I think the quickest way, the efficient way, is to send it off to the Planning Commission, see what they can do with it. If it continues to be an issue, or we feel it's not getting the coverage, then we can try to create this committee. But again, I'm really concerned about the scope of the committee's charge, of every one of those members understanding that this isn't just, hey, we can get involved in everything. Let's start talking about, city facilities and telling the city manager that again, where is this going? So I need to understand that before we commit to a course of action of a new. But again, I'm one, and we're missing one member, so we're almost evenly split here tonight. So are we helping at all on this? I think we're sending you off on 2 tracks. Councilmember Talbot.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to agree with you in the sense that I still, we have talked about this at exec session, and we passed the grant tonight. And I guess like you, I still feel like there's some nebulousness as to like, what are the top 5 things that this committee what are the top 5 work plan items? And my sense of things from the presentations and the information that we've heard is, because the grant covered this whole scope of work from items 1 to 97, that it, there's climate, there's urban heat islands and that topic matter to talk about. There's the urban forestry plan, there's the shoreline management plan, but we haven't, I guess I'm struggling to understand, okay, what are the succinct deliverables that we're going to start with from that scope as targets to get to, and what will be the top 3 or 5 that we're asking this committee to do? And the first one I think that we've talked about is the urban forestry plan, right? I mean, like you said, that's what we're trying to get to. It's also, I think, well scrutinized topic in the community. This council, I've heard ask questions all the time. When can we figure out where we can replant, and et cetera, and et cetera. And so that is, we need that question. We need that question answered. We need to start that plan. So I think also too, the other thing is like the planning commission is the body that looks at things in the code, like expanding parking lots. And so they would, so if through option B, we're asking them to now analyze urban heat islands and urban forestry and marry that with solutions in our code to, to make that balance out, and then you're asking that among a group that tends to be kind of development oriented, there is kind of a risk that you may not get the optimal conditions and teeth in the code that we need, that the community is looking for. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Councilmember Brandstetter, and then I think we should probably wrap this up.
Mr. Mayor, well, obviously there are some differences in the vision of what an advisory committee on the natural environment and climate change would do for us. And I would just say, yeah, it is nebulous, and I think that's a good thing, because I think that this is an area that we have not really had anybody sort of just taking a look at what could we do, and what is the potential in Lakewood to be able to go and do some things, and then recommend some policy things that maybe then have to be worked out by the parks people, or that would have to go to if it got to the point of where there was some initiative that we wanted to then get into code to do that, then there are processes to go through to be able to go and do that. My concern with just adding this as another thing for the Planning Commission is, instead of having a committee that would meet 10 or 18 times a year and have discussions about what is possible and of how to make this a better livable community through the lens of the natural environment and climate change, is very different than having very, very structured things for the Planning Commission to do that maybe we'll be able to devote 2 meetings a year to discuss, and not the entire meeting to be able to go and do that. So this group may come up with ideas that we as a council will then actually, for specific implementation, have to, through staff, to whichever are the appropriate things have to do. But I think we'll not get to any idea learning, what's possible, but that we're not thinking about if we leave it with the Planning Commission to be able to go and do that. And we would also be a task force assembled by the Planning Commission, would report to the Planning Commission, and would make us seem like we're removing ourselves from the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple last comments. I appreciate your perspective on really needing to set some guardrails and scope for an advisory board if we were to create one for this. And I think that's the role of council with our advisory boards, is to define a work plan that puts in those guardrails around what's in scope and out of scope for them. And I don't think that's beyond our capabilities to do that. I appreciate what all council members have said on this topic, and I think it's something that it's on us to find a good solution for our residents when it comes to the natural environment and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lauricella. So, Ms. Spear, I think you've heard the somewhat of a consensus here.
If I could just pair it back to you and make sure I'm understanding, I'd really appreciate that. It sounds like the discussion, of course, is not over, and there needs to be much further clarification of what a standalone advisory board might have responsibility for. Also, what would be the short, mid, or long-term items that they're responsible for. I will say that there are some things that are underway with the implementation of state law where the city needs to get some technical expertise sooner rather than later, given the deadlines that we have in order to meet state law. So there may be a position where we do try to pull together a task force separate and apart from this advisory board, because it's from the sound of what I'm hearing from the council members is it is a perennial group that is there for beyond what we're talking about today in terms of what has to be done by 2029, and the way it functions is yet to be determined. So we can certainly bring back information to you regarding what an advisory board could look like, what it would do in more specificity than what you got today. But if there's anything else you'd like, I appreciate the direction.
Yeah, I think to summarize it in my parlance, we're really looking for direction for this committee, right? Like understanding that they're going to stay within certain parameters, and that this doesn't get, because I mean, theoretically, almost anything is climate change, right? I mean, we could tie planning to climate change, and there's been attempts, right, at the federal court level to take over. They didn't work, but there were serious attempts, right, about, well, there's climate change, therefore a federal judge should have the right to decide zoning and land use, you know, countrywide, right, kind of things. And so what I'm saying is anything could be, with a bright person, anything is climate change. And so we need to, if we're going to have this committee separate, we need to understand, kind of get some idea, and then we'll make that decision as to what they're going to be in charge of.
Sure.
What their charge is where I think I'm going with it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, good discussion. Thank you very much. Mr. City Manager, reports by the city manager, and we got all sorts of stuff going. I'm counting days, and suddenly this is becoming a full-time job. So,
Well, so what I heard.
I'm not taking that, don't take that as a complaint at, you know, 9 o'clock at night, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, so several items, update. Previously, council gave direction and adopted the work plan for the Public Safety Advisory Board to prioritize locations of potential speed cameras throughout the city. That's been given to them. One of the things we did in the memo that went out to them was that they'd categorize some of those locations by high, medium, or low priority, because we thought they may just struggle with what's number 8 versus number 9. And I guess Councilman Lauricella, you sit on that. Hopefully that is okay from your perspective to kind of make that a little bit more efficient use of their time.
Yes, I think that'll help with prioritizing where we want to put things, because I don't think we're ready to put them in all locations at this point and turn the city into a giant speed trap.
Yeah.
Safer though.
But we'll also have an upcoming agenda item looking at awarding contract for the sub-area transportation plan as part of the RAISE grant. I hadn't heard about it because it was stuck in change of federal administration and awarding of RAISE grants, and then got through the Washington State Department of Transportation, ready to start moving forward on it. So that'll be coming forward in one of the upcoming meetings to award that contract. Did approve the volunteer program. That is the first step in implementing some of these. Now we need to identify those sites, go forward with the permitting, address some of the issues that are emerging with surveys. That'll come back before council in terms of establishing components related to that. We do have our day at the Hill tomorrow. I have 4 members from the council joining Michael Vargas and myself to go to Olympia. So we'll be hitting that. Also have brought it up previously, but trying to refine our legislative efforts in DC on the federal platform. So trying to refine who's going to be attending, and then we can work on dates. I know historically it's been mayor, deputy mayor. Don't know if that's how council wants to continue on, if you want to enlarge that, but hopefully we can decide that tonight so we can work with whomever is going to go on what dates we hit and different meetings to set up. So I would please ask for some direction tonight in terms of what that team would look like.
Yeah, I think the deputy mayor and I are both available. And I don't know that we typically take more than 2 and you. But I mean, if somebody really wants to go, let us know. We're working on some dates. We'll try to make it a 3 or 4 day.
Yeah, so what I'll do, so I'm hearing mayor and deputy mayor. Connect with the both of you. We'll establish a week that works for us, and terms and meetings. I know definitely meet with our delegation. Have met with other groups in the past, in my experience, based on projects we have at hand in terms of federal agencies like Department of Transportation, Surface Transportation Board, just depending what we have. So we'll kind of meet to see where we want to go with that and establish a component.
Always better to go in with a plan. Right, it's a long trip to go without a plan, and hope that people just want to eat bean soup with you or whatever. Do they still serve bean soup?
So we'll coordinate then with you two here upcoming. We do have things on the calendar. I'll just briefly go through them. Going to Olympia, of course, tomorrow. Also have Downtown Neighborhood Association tomorrow evening, Planning Commission tomorrow evening, upcoming meetings with the Community Services Advisory Board, the Caring for Kids event, Parks and Rec Board meets next week, Fort Silicon Neighborhood Association, Puget Sound Regional Council is upcoming, and the Asia Pacific Cultural Center and their New Year celebration on the 28th. So those items are on the calendar, and then I'll go ahead and cut her off right there.
Thank you. Who has the Downtown Association tomorrow night? Do any of us have that? Do we have somebody assigned? Because somebody's got to, yeah.
Councilman Pearson tomorrow night?
Okay. Can you make it? Can you make it? Who's going to the Leshai Walk? I probably need to be there as mayor.
Oh, yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Starts at noon and it's within the park.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's Thursday.
It's my intent and desire to go. I don't think I'll be able to stay for the whole thing.
Mike, are you going? Yeah, and I think I'm planning to be there if I can work from home on Thursday. My goal is to be there. I think that's important. We just kind of need to know where it's at. I think I have 3 more spots. I have 3 spots left for my Caring for Kids table. So do you want to go?
And when it's me, that's 2 seats.
That's 2 seats. Great. Thank you. Thank you. We're glad to hear that, and we can talk about ballet. Okay, and then Ms. Schumacher, you just sent us thing for the Clover Park Rotary, did the city get a table or we're purchasing individually? Or is that just a reminder?
Yeah, so this would be individually. This was in response to the public comments that were made this evening.
Great. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. So individually. So that is on the Friday, the 6th, and the Multicultural Coalition thing is on the 7th. And you're going to talk to that when we get around to council member comments. Okay, so Councilmember Laura Sella, you can start comments and tell us about, oh, you do. Wait a second. I'm jumping way ahead here.
One question for the city manager. So in the past, the calendar, I was going to miss tomorrow's, what is it, downtown neighborhood? In the past, the name had followed in the calendar invite. Is there any way we can go back to that instead of having them nested inside the, I know it's probably a pain, but I think it really makes it easy for us to keep track of all of the, who's going to what.
Yeah, you're talking way above my head in terms
Yeah.
of quality. I'm gonna look up
Talking-
the expert.
Talking through you, yeah, Mr. Yeah.
Yes, we can update the schedule or the calendar so that it shows exactly on the invite. who
I
is attending.
appreciate it. Sorry, yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm just reading that. I do not know how that function works.
Let's start with council member comments. Councilmember Laura Sella.
Thank you, Mayor Boki. Actually, I did have a question for the city manager. I noticed on the consent agenda that some items have dollar values called out and some don't. Is that by virtue of the dollar amount that?
Which ones are you looking at?
So I know on our consent agenda, there was an item that was more than 100,000, but there are some that were less, that weren't, those dollar values weren't in the consent agenda itself. They were only when you went into the item. So just looking for consistency.
Sure.
And how that comes forward. Okay, thanks.
You just in the title?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't think there was any necessary rhyme or reason. Just trying to pull that up here.
Okay, while you're pulling that up, I'll start with my council member comments. As the city manager mentioned, the Public Safety Advisory Committee had a good meeting a couple of weeks back, had good representation with the city attorney there to talk about the traffic cameras. The one location that I didn't see on the list that was brought up in public comments a couple of weeks ago was in front of St. Francis Cabrini as a school. 108th gets a good amount of traffic, especially with the current construction going on. And people often come in from Bridgeport traveling at 35 and don't necessarily slow down for that school zone. So it'd be good to add that to the list of potential locations for the advisory committee to look at. I will be attending the Community Service Advisory Board meeting on Thursday. Talking about our mixed use versus MF3 zoning. A good example to look at is University Place. They've got a lot of mixed use areas that are zoned specifically for that. I don't know if that is something that, as we send things back to the Planning Commission to look at how we title that sort of space in the Station District, if that's an option, just something to look at. In public comment, topic came up about volunteers versus city resources for maintaining parks, lakes, and street ends. I'm curious if we've looked at what it would take if we don't have the resources internally to contract for maintenance of those spaces if we are not capable within our current staffing levels. So I'd be curious to see what that looks like. And then the last thing, I've been asked to join the steering committee for the Alliance for Sustainable Climate Action. I was already a member of that community group, but they've asked me to be on the steering committee, so I'm excited for that. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, appreciated all of our comments and discussion tonight. Thought it was fruitful, and looking forward to our meeting down in Olympia tomorrow. So that'll be the first time going down there, and excited for it.
Thank you. Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you. I will attend Planning Commission tomorrow. So, and then also regarding the public comments tonight, the area, the Lockburn Lane came up, and I was wondering if what speed treatments or like what speed studies have been done in that area. I know that is a very small local street, so I necessarily wouldn't expect a speed study for that segment, but Silicon Boulevard between like Bridgeport and John Dower, or maybe even John Dower and Lakewood Drive. If there are any recent speed studies, it would be good to know what the city is noticing about speeds in that area. Today or this month is the 13th moon in the Chinese New Year, so happy Lunar New Year to our Lunar New Year celebrating residents. Thank you.
Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow I'll be attending the Southside 911 board, which is going to meet tomorrow, and I'll go to the Leshai Walk on Thursday. I should note that I will be out of town on March 2nd, so I will not be present for our next meeting. Okay, depending upon my situation, I may log in virtually or may not, because I'm going to be on a train. And so I have no idea, and the train will probably be in Montana. So who knows what the likelihood of that is. I was really concerned about it's true that we have a lot of property in the city, street ends and other things, and that so it's a challenge to maintain it, but it's also not true that we don't have a plan. There is a plan that calls for certain places to be maintained twice a year, going off, being able to go and do that. It exists in the operations and maintenance of folks to be able to go and do that. Some places the gas gets cut every week, sometimes it goes on off, but there is a plan, and every site fits into a category about how long it does, and it's not that they're never done. That it was street ends were typically on the once a year, the second lowest intensity of care to do that, which is one reason why we as a council decided that we want to do a significant development of one street end each biennium. And we're in the Westlake, we're in the biennium where the Westlake project is going on. And we're looking for the Parks Commission to look at, okay, so in the 27-28, what's the next project? And this took place some years after not developing any of them. We went through, been going back to do that. But we're going on to be able to take care of those. The lady that commented about her in her landlord's experience with the rental housing safety program, the problems that she described didn't surprise me, that they would be of concern to an inspector of there being unheated portions of a rental property. But it did remind me that we have in the past had to do periodic updates as related to code changes and other things with the checklist that our inspectors are there and are using. And so I think that there's maybe, I'm not quite sure when the last time that was done, but it's probably something that should be checked on as things go on. And then I would be remiss if to, former council member, former Deputy Mayor Moss is very invested in the Lakewood Multicultural Coalition Claudia Thomas Awards Gala that's on March 7th, that some of us are going. The city has funded for some others to be able to go and do that. And so I would certainly urge you to support that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. Deputy Mayor Bell, and you're gonna enlighten us with some of your comments.
So Member Branstetter stole all my thunder. I was going to read about our previous Deputy Mayor Moss's, her gala. So I wanted to make sure I got all the information out there. It's the Lakewood Multicultural Coalition. It's their 4th annual Dr. Claudia Thomas Gala, and it is on March 7th at 6 p.m. at the McGavick Center. And I believe that you can still find the tickets online. I've seen them on Facebook. I don't see a website on here, but I would encourage everybody to go to the Facebook page for the Lakewood Multicultural Coalition, and you could get the tickets there. It'll be a wonderful evening. It says on here, and I have been before also, there's going to be live music and a DJ and a special dance presentation from the Asian Pacific Cultural Center. So I am looking forward to that. I'm also will be going to Caring for Kids this Saturday. So thank you, Mayor Boki, for that. And also wanted to just reiterate and a thank you to our staff for their presentations and all the work that they put into everything, and to really bring us all just top quality information where our questions are very minimal. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So just like to do a number of kudos tonight. First of all, the Deputy Mayor and I went to and Councilmember Branstetter was also there, Lake City Neighborhood Association, on the invitation that they wanted to speak to the mayor and deputy mayor and answer some questions. Very nice crowd. And I would point, one of the nice things is this is a neighborhood association that made a transition from Larry and Vanessa Woods to the new individual, and I'm gonna Melissa. And they've just done a really nice job, and they've got pretty much the same crowd, so it was good. They're very engaged. Lions Club crab feed on Saturday night was a wonderful event. Our own Councilmember Branstetter is part of the Lions Club, and we really do appreciate all the work that they have done in our community and continue to do. Caring for Kids, all that. So yeah, I think I've got pretty much everything. We'll see you tomorrow morning, and we'll take a run at the legislature and see how that goes. There's a lot of things going on. And I'm looking forward to that. Do appreciate all the people who are very instrumental in getting a cityhood and making cityhood work, because those first folks are just such an important part. I mean, they set so many agendas, and they lay that foundation. And we stand on that foundation, and we can talk about other things because a lot of other things were taken care of under a lot of hard work. And I've heard about the meetings going till midnight, good, good for them. If the mayor talks some more, maybe we will be here till midnight. So, but really do appreciate them showing up tonight and saying hello and well-deserved recognition for putting that work in. And one of the things that I mentioned to the Lake City Neighborhood Association, and this is one of the things I'm saying this to the city manager because he's working on a presentation that I'm going to do in front of groups, I guess, is it's really important. It's very easy to fall back and say on what's wrong, right? I mean, one of the beauties of being an elected official or being a public servant is every day there's something else to work on, right? The world just keeps changing. But there's also, I think, times when you really have to say, hey, look at what we have accomplished here. And, I moved here in 1998, so I've seen a lot. 2 members here, Treston and Ellen, lived here. They could tell us, their thoughts. So I think it's, and Mike is, I think, here previous to cityhood, were you not? I don't know when you moved here. 93. So, I mean, it's important to step back and part of this 30th anniversary in my mind is to remind people that your money has been well spent, that we have done some really amazing things, that we live in a community that's much safer, that despite some issues with planning, we've really made a lot of really positive changes on a lot of things. And we're talking about things tonight that I think are going to create more positive changes in the future. So just remember that. I mean, there's always a job to do. That's the beauty of being an elected official. There's always going to be something new on your plate. But also, don't necessarily give in to the negativity that things haven't changed or haven't changed for the better. It all depends on what you're looking at. If I look at crime numbers, they've changed for the better. I mean, there's people alive tonight because of the changes that this community made. And so just remember that, and thank you very much. I've spoken enough. We've got a busy week, and looking forward to all those great things. Thank you. We are adjourned.